decided today to do a testimony video. I was gonna type it out, I was gonna send it out, but I felt like I wanted to record it for several reasons. But number one, to get out of my comfort zone, because I don't like doing videos. But here goes. It's Throwback Thursday, and I got the reminder that July 16th, 2011, I think it was 2011, I died and was resuscitated. In my late 20s, I started having pains in my chest, so I went to my doctor, and they ran some tests, did some x-rays and different things to find out what it was, to make sure it wasn't heart related. And I remember I went into the x-ray room, and the technician did my x-rays, and she, finished, and she asked me to get dressed, and she came back and she said, Ms. Fitton, I believe that I had the film upside down, so I need you to come back in and let me do another x-ray. So I was like, okay, not a problem. So I went back into the x-ray room, and they did another x-ray. So I went back into the waiting room, and she came to get me, and the nurse came to get me, and I went to see the doctor. And the doctor looks at me, and he is holding the film. This was a long time ago. So the x-ray film, used to be really big during that time. It wasn't on your phone or on your computer or on your tablet. It was actually a large piece of film that they would have your x-ray of your anatomy, whatever it was that they were x-raying. So this was of my chest area. And I remember him looking at it, and I remember him turning it upside down, flipping it around, and trying to figure out what he was looking at. And he says to me, we did 2 x-rays, and the film was put in correctly, because we didn't believe that it was the first time. So he said, but has anybody ever told you that your heart is on the right side? And at that time, I had only had one surgery, only one reason to actually have anybody x-ray or have a reason to look at my chest or any part of my body. And I was probably 7 at that time. So when he asked me this, I said no. I've never had any doctor, anyone say that, there was anything wrong with my organs, the anatomy of my organs. And he said the pain that you are having is related to your diaphragm. It looks as if your diaphragm is slightly herniated, and it was elevated slightly, and that is where the pain was coming from. So he explained that because of the elevation of my diaphragm, it was actually distorting my organs, so it was causing some of my organs to be misplaced, and one of those was my heart. So he explained that this was probably a birth defect, and I'd had it my entire life. I just had not ever been diagnosed with it. So for years, every x-ray that I had, it would show that my heart was on the right side. And it was hard explaining that whenever I would have to have x-rays or anything done. But, that was how my body was. So in my 30s, I went ahead. He told me that I was fine. There was no medical issues. There was nothing that was life-threatening. So just go on with your life. If anything serious happens, if you start having pain, just take some pain medication, but you're going to be fine. So I was like, fine, I'm going to be fine. So I'll just continue on with my life and do whatever it is that I do. So I was very active. I worked out all the time. I was kickboxing. I was playing a little bit of softball in my late 20s, early 30s. So I've always been pretty active. And that's never, my birth defect never affected me because I always played sports in high school, in middle school, growing up. That was what my family did. We've always been very athletic. Well, tried to be. I'm not saying that I'm a great athlete or anything, but I was always very active. So in my 30s, I started having pains that were pretty bad. And so I started going to the doctor, and they, started running some tests and trying to figure out where it was coming from to see if it was heart related. And at that time, they explained to me that my diaphragm had herniated. It had moved up even further, and it was pressing on my lungs. And it was very strange because what they wanted to do was just treat the symptoms, which was the pain. So I was constantly being thrown pain pills, whether it was Vicodin, whether it was oxycodone or something like that. That was how they wanted to treat it. And I'm not going to say I was dependent on it, but it became a necessity in my life at that time in my 30s, because that's how I was able to function without the pain. I wasn't addicted or anything, but it was definitely a necessity for me to be able to function. So I was around 37, 38, and the pain was unbearable. It was to the point where I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move to the left. I couldn't move to the right without losing my breath because of the pain. So I had to find a doctor that was comfortable with trying to figure out what we were going to do to try and fix what was going on. So my primary physician, my PCP, helped me find a doctor in Raleigh, and he was with with Duke Medical Center. He had never performed this surgery. He had never seen anything like this before, so he had to consult with another doctor, and they figured out what they were going to do. So he agreed to do the surgery, and it was more or less just to put my diaphragm back into place and push my organs down so that they were not pressing up against my lung and causing my lung, because at that time my lung was starting to deflate. So I had the surgery. This was in 2009, in March of 2009. I had the first surgery, and it was laparoscopic, so it wasn't that big of a scar. He went in and did it laparoscopically. And what he did, what I was told he did, was to go in and insert a mesh and suture it together so that the diaphragm, the hole was closed up and everything was pushed back down. So I went through my recovery thinking that I was going to be fine. There was nothing else going on. My heart was still displaced at that time because it had been there for so long that that's just where it was. So over the next few years, over the next year, I was fine. I recovered pretty quickly within a couple of months. And in 2010 actually, at the end of the year, I remember I was starting to get sick again. It's like, why am I having these pains again? It had been about a year and a half since I had the first surgery. So I could not understand why I was having these pains again. So I started going back to the doctor. I actually went, I was in excruciating pain. So I went to Duke Hospital, to the emergency room, so that I could find out what was going on. I didn't want to deal with the doctor who had performed the surgery the first time, even though I did call him. I let them know what was going on. they were trying to schedule an appointment for me to come in, but just one thing after another happened, and I kept saying, I don't know if I want to deal with him. I don't know if this is a good idea. But I went to the hospital. They did some tests, and they said, Miss Fitton, your your diaphragm has a hole in it again, and it looks like your organs are migrating again. So I was working at this time, and I was missing a lot of time from work because I was sick. Little did I know, I was deathly sick. And so I was missing time from work. In January, my job actually fired me for missing time from work. And it was that little bit of time between the FMLA renewal process, and they fired me between those. It was literally like 2 days between those times, and they fired me on that day that fell right between my FMLA renewing. So I understood that. As a business owner now, I know that business is priority. Business comes first. But I was really sick. I was married at this time, and my husband was not happy that I didn't have a job because we did rely on both of our incomes to be able to maintain our household. And so there was tension. I was stressed out. I didn't know what I was going to do. So I've always tried different things. I've always been a hustler. So I was trying to, I was making items, I was selling items, I was doing different things as I was still going through this illness. So in June, I started having more tests done. I was back and forth to the doctor, and they were doing MRIs and CAT scans. They were trying to figure out what to do at this time. This is kind of difficult to talk about, but my marriage was not in a great place. So we were on very bad terms by this time. So I was literally going to every doctor's appointment. I was doing everything on my own. And I was trying not to be sick so that I could try and be there for my marriage. Because when you're already stressed out because of marital problems, because there already being tension in our marriage, and illness only exacerbated the issue because I was not able to be there present in my marriage. I believed that we were married till death do us part. So even there were things that were going on, I was still trying to be present for my marriage. So we were in the process of moving from one house to the other. And there was a period where we had to move out of one house, and before the other house was ready for us to move into, we had to move into my sister's house. And during that time, the tension was so high in my marriage at that time. It was pretty bad. And I remember called my doctor, and I said, I have to see someone because this is very serious at this point. So we had made an appointment for me to have another test done that following Wednesday. That Tuesday morning on July 16th, I woke up and I didn't think I was gonna make it. My husband went to work. I remember telling him that I didn't feel well, and my husband went to work. My sister had something to do, and she had left the house. The boys were there in the house, asleep. So I remember getting dressed and saying, I'm going to drive myself to the hospital, to the emergency room, because I'm not gonna make it if I stay here in this bed. And we had a truck and a car at that time, and my ex-husband drove the car to work. So I remember going out, and trying to get into the truck, and I could not lift my legs high enough to get into the truck. I was so weak and in so much pain. And I went back into the house, and I remember laying in my sister's foyer on the hardwood floor. And I said, if I don't get to the hospital, I'm going to die right here. And I can't let the kids find me like this. So I called my parents, who lived maybe 5 minutes away, and I told them that I needed them immediately. And they were there like immediately. And they drove me to Duke Hospital. And I remember on the way, I was having to tell my dad, can you pull over? Because I think I'm gonna throw up. And I remember him having to pull over a few times and it wasn't that I was throwing anything up. I was just dry heaving. And it hurt so bad when I was trying to throw up. And I finally got to the emergency room, and I checked in, and I told my mom, I'm going to the bathroom, because I was feeling so bad I could not sit in the waiting room and sit upright. I had to lay down. And if anybody knows me, they know that I'm a neat freak and very clean. And I went to the bathroom, and I laid down in an emergency room bathroom floor. And I felt like if they did not hurry up, I was gonna die in the bathroom. So I went back out, and I told the front desk, I need to see someone now. I'm not going to make it. And I could see my mom, she was so worried. I could tell that she was. And I went back into the bathroom, and I laid back down on the floor in the handicap stall, because it was bigger. And I called a friend. She was actually a friend of my ex-husband's, but her and I had become pretty close. And I called her because she worked at the hospital. And I said, I need you to help me be seen now. I'm not gonna make it. And she came downstairs immediately, and they came in with a wheelchair, and it took about maybe 10 minutes, and I was taken back to be seen. And when they finally came in, they said, we need to do an MRI. I actually had my old MRI. I had x-rays and stuff with me. So I handed them to the nurse, and they looked them over, and they said, okay, this was, from a little while ago. We'll take an MRI so we can see what's going on. So they did an x-ray first, and they said it looks as if your organs have migrated into your chest. Your left lung is collapsed, and your right one is deflating. And they said, we're going to do an MRI, and so we can see exactly what the extent of the damage is. So I went in, they gave me some pain medication, and started the IV, gave me the pain medication so that I would be a little more comfortable. And then they took me to have the MRI. And all of this was happening very fast. This was probably 10 o'clock in the morning, so that I got there. So this was probably 1 o'clock by this time. So I went to have the MRI, went back to my room, the little emergency room, and the doctors came in, and they said, how are you still breathing? And I didn't understand what they meant when they said that. The The doctor that came in, Dr. David Harpo, I will never forget him. He said, you should not be alive. I don't know how you're still alive. I don't know how you walked in here. Your stomach is here in your chest, and it is filled with blood and bile. And your lung is deflated, and your right one is almost completely deflated as well. My liver was somewhere up here. My stomach was literally up here, and my spleen was right under it, and my colon was wrapped around it. He said, I don't know how you're still here. We need to do emergency surgery. But because of the fluid in your stomach and the bile, we have to pump your stomach first, or you're not going to survive the surgery. So they put the tubes in, and they began pumping my stomach. They said and I told them I had an appointment that following Wednesday with my previous surgeon to discuss how, we were going to fix the problem. And he said, if you would have waited, you would have died. And I was so grateful that I listened to myself, because usually I'm a little hard-headed. And I'm glad that I did go to the ER. So my ex-husband didn't show up until about 8 o'clock that night, when they were finally moving me to my room, when they finally were able to admit me and find me a room. And he finally showed up. So I was pretty stressed, not having him there. I told my parents to go home. I was fine. They had been there all day, so I asked them to leave. My friend, Kim, I am forever grateful to her and for her for getting me seen when she did, when getting me through all of that emergency room red tape. So the next day they did the surgery, and it was, it was a thoracotomy, so they did have to cut me open for this one. They couldn't do it laparoscopic. Like I said, Dr. David Harpo literally saved my life. And after the surgery, I was in recovery the following day, and they did an epidural for the pain, so I had to have an epidural put in. After you have surgery, you have to go through a series of different things so that your body doesn't turn on itself. And one of those things is to get up after it's safe to get up and walk a little bit. So I remember the nurse comes in, and my parents weren't there. This was very early. A Thursday, I believe, the nurse got me up to walk the first time. And I remember him getting me up. At this time, I had tubes because they was still draining the fluid from my abdominal cavity and my lung area. So I still had a lot of fluid in me, so I probably had 3 tubes, I believe, coming out of me at that time, and I was hooked up to machines. So I remember him having to get me up and get the cart, that I could push that had all of the equipment on it, and so I was supposed to push that as I walked. And the nurse got me up, and I said, and we walked right outside of my room, and I said, I'm silly, y'all. I am, no matter what's going on. I'm silly. But I said, am I supposed to see stars? And that was the last thing that I remember until I was this dude, he explained everything to me afterwards. And when I said, am I supposed to see stars, I literally started to fall, to drop. I was passing out. And he caught me, he said, and he wrapped his arms around me. And luckily there was a chair, because we were right near the nurse's station. And he sat me in the chair so I wouldn't hit the ground. Because remember, I still have all of these tubes attached. So the other nurses, everyone comes, they pick me up and they carry me back to my bed. And at this time, I am awake, but not in an awake state in my body. I was awake, hovering over my bed, and I could see that there was a doctor that was on the left of me, and he was holding my hand, and there was a doctor that was literally on top of me doing chest compressions. I remember someone took my sock off and they were pricking my feet. I had an oxygen mask on, and I remember the doctor saying, get the crash cart. And everyone was scrambling and moving around. And the doctor that was, I'm assuming he was a doctor, he had on a white coat with a stethoscope, and I could see there was something written on his jacket, but I do not remember what it said. And he was a black gentleman, and he was rubbing my hand and he was praying. And I remember him so vividly on the left of me. And when they said, get the crash cart, because I could hear the heart monitor, it was the loud flatlined sound, and I could hear that. And when they said that, I remember I took a breath and I came to. So yeah, I flatlined and died. I was out probably for 10 minutes, and my family wasn't there. I don't remember having any thoughts about my family. I don't remember a white light. I don't remember any of the things that people say happens when they die. I didn't have any of that. I literally just saw the entire room with people working on me and trying to revive me. And that's all I remember from that. But the recovery was hard. I remember being discharged from the hospital, and my ex-husband decided to go to church that morning. I was supposed to be discharged, but he wanted to go to church with his family. And I had to wait for him to come back to come and get me. So yeah, that recovery was difficult. It was hard, it was long, because it was a very extensive surgery. They had to go in and move all of my organs back into place, and they had to put a piece of mesh. So my diaphragm is literally a piece of mesh now. It was sewn this time, not stapled, because my previous surgery, I found out later that the doctor had used staples instead of suturing it back together, and that's why it tore. But it was a very long recovery. It was very difficult. It was very painful. But I survived. And I want to say to you that as soon as you believe that you can't take anymore, God breathes life into you and gives you that extra oomph to make it. So never doubt your ability to get through something, because He is always there to give you that extra breath, to give you that extra little bit of energy that you need to survive. Never say that you don't think you can make it, or you don't think that you're gonna make it through what you perceive as the worst time of your life. Because if anybody would have told me that I was going to go through that when I was experiencing the difficulty in my marriage just a few months prior, if anybody would have told me how bad it was going to get, if they would try to explain that to me, I wouldn't have believed it. But because of that strength, because of my faith, and because of my belief in God, I survived. And I am here today to let you know that you can survive too. Even what the devil meant for your demise, God can use it to turn around, to bring you into the fullness of joy. And I'm here to attest to that. So keep going. Keep choosing joy. And you're going to be just fine. Because I know I am.